Oh, Greg Vanney with us. Five trophies as a player, five trophies as a coach, an MLS original, played 168 games for the LA Galaxy, starting in 1996. And now he's back with the Galaxy as a head coach in his fourth season now. And Greg, before we get started, I wonder, do you ever just take a moment to look back? I mean, there's been a lot of things that have happened in your life, in your career, both as a player and as a coach. Chivas, Toronto, where you won those five trophies, and now you're trying to get the Galaxy back to the top. And that number five really resonates because it's five MLS Cups
Yeah.
that your club has won. But what do you think?
It's been it's been an amazing ride. As a player, I think back to the times a lot just because I'm surrounded in our club and our staff and obviously friends from those days where we always reminisce about moments, experiences, things that we've gone through. And so every now and then I think back. I have boys now that are 16, twins that are 16 and one that's 12, who they're starting to kind of wrap their heads around sort of the history of what I was doing as a player and now as a coach, where they're able to like sit down and really focus on it. When they were younger, they were kind of just flying through it, but now they're actually focusing on it. So it's fun. It's been a great process. Obviously, Toronto was a wonderful experience where I was a new coach at the professional level, and there were a lot of people around me, including my players and my staff and everyone else who helped me grow with the role. And over time, we became very successful. But I learned a lot in that experience, and I continue to learn even when I'm here with a new set of players, which require different things from me than that set of players. So every experience, every day is a new day, and it's a learning day, which is what I really enjoy about this. And there's always challenges that arise. And what we're trying to do now is what you said is really put this group together and get them to a point where they are really clicking, and that they also believe that they can be champions, and that the pieces of what we're trying to do on the field and the connections that we're trying to make as a team can help us to be successful. And it's always different. No matter every year, it's different because you have guys who turn over and change, and so it's this ongoing thing where it's hard to look back sometimes, but you do quickly because there's always something that you're trying to attack in front of you, which is kind of how I am always looking forward.
I thought about you talking about your children now. They're grown older and they can appreciate it a little bit more. But now that they've learned more about the game, they might question some of your coaching decisions a little more frequently.
They might. They're in the house and they hear a lot of the insight on why I do what I'm doing in the house, whether I'm talking to them or just watching and talking to my wife or whoever. So they usually have a little bit of insight, but they might ask a question here or there as to like a substitution. Why'd you do that, or something? They're starting to get opinionated for sure.
If you go back to Toronto, and I think, designated players have become such a big part of the league, from prior to the
Sure.
time you were playing to now as you've developed as a coach, and you had Giovinco, Altidore, and Bradley at Toronto. And I mean, it was like that was like the perfect storm of DPs, which I think you really rarely get that kind of a trio that can really foster what happened at Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
In LA, it's been a little different. I mean, you've had talented
Sure.
DPs, but they've never seemed to have gelled at the same time.
Yeah, in Toronto, you had the combination of talent, uh, leadership, both just from like leadership by example. I mean, a guy like Michael Bradley shows up to work every single day. Every single day is the most important day. And so just to create an environment or set a standard for everybody else that's there, Sebastian was the ultimate, like he's a winner. He's just, he plays to win. He only thinks about winning, and he's bringing everybody with him too. And Josie was a guy that he could just turn a game. He didn't have to be about him, but he had so much soccer knowledge and just the ability, especially on some of the big moments, to help the team get over the hump. And so you had just this group of guys who, they fit together. They complemented one another, which was our goal. And putting that group together was getting three DPs who complemented one another, and then you build around them. And that's what ultimately was able to happen there. And so been trying to replicate that here over time. It hasn't been as smooth. Obviously, that was kind of a bit of a one shot or 1.5 shot move there that got everybody together. But here it's taken a little more time. When I arrived, when I took the job, I thought that Christian Pavone was going to be one of our DPs. Well, that all fell apart. So now you're having to quickly, coming out of COVID, not having really a great scouting plan because we thought we were gonna have him back. We didn't really have a clear solution. We wanted to start to adapt. So it's just nothing about filling those DP roles has gone really smooth until this offseason. We've had 2 open DP spots to go with Ricky Pooch, who we brought in obviously a year and a half ago. And now we have 2 spots to try to get the complementary pieces to put this group back together. And as you said, we've had very talented players, but it's been hard to get our 3 DPs on the field consistently together. Last year was no exception with the quantity of injuries that we had. Just, and that's one of the things. It doesn't matter how great your DPs are. If they're not on the field together, they're not helping, they're not impacting anything. And so that was the key. In 2017, our 3 DPs in Toronto played almost all the time, probably 75 to 80% of the minutes, and we had a phenomenal season. And we've not gotten anywhere close to that here in LA, which hopefully we can change.
Well, you mentioned Ricky Pooch, and then I think of Giovinco.
Yep.
And I don't know if there's a similarity here, but Ricky Pooch, in order to be effective, needs a certain amount of freedom. Yet you need to do that within the structure of a team. I'm wondering if Giovinco maybe was similar in that manner. And that is that blend, I always think is a pretty big challenge because you're also dealing with a personality there as well.
Sure.
So how do you coach that?
Yeah, they're 2, first of all, in comparison, 2 very different players in that Sebastian never liked to get too far away from the goal. He and I actually had the discussion at one point about possibly playing him as more of like an attacking midfielder at one point. And he was like, I'll do it, but the farther I get away from the goal, the less goals I'm going to score. He kind of saw himself as this guy that, with being a smaller in stature, it wasn't always so easy for him to start deep and end up back in front of the goal. And so he always wanted to play higher, and then be looking back on the field and see everything that's going, and then adjust his position based off of the reading, looking back as a striker or as a forward.
Right.
Ricky, on the other hand, he likes to drop down and pick up the ball because he's a smaller guy. He doesn't necessarily like to be up against the big, strong center backs. He likes to drop down, pick up the ball, turn and face forward. And then his superpower is he's so quick with the ball, shifting between lines, or he'll play forward and then he'll build momentum forward, and then he'll start to arrive late to situations. So that's the difference in them, but their capacity to make a play. Seba more of a goal scorer than Ricky, but their capacity to make a play is interesting. And they both like the ability to read the game a little bit and position themselves according to what they're seeing happening on the field. We try to create structure with Ricky that he can have some mobility, but we don't really want him all over the place. But we try to make sure that he has some space to be able to move and select sort of the height on the field that he wants to be at. But we have to create structure around that too.
LA Galaxy head coach Greg Vanney with us here on this MLS preview. The Galaxy among the 11 MLS teams playing at the Coachella Invitational. And Ricky Pooch played about a half hour. He debuted in your opening game, but hasn't played since. And does he have a knock, or what's his status right now?
Well, he's coming back from a high ankle sprain at the end of last season. And so in the off season, he tried to rest, do some rehab, get there. Down the stretch, he wasn't feeling, when I say down the stretch, towards the beginning of preseason, when he was set to return back to LA, he just wasn't, he was doing a lot of his soccer fitness, but he was stuck at like 85% healthy, and it just wasn't clicking. So he went through sort of another reset on his rehab, which took him a little time, and then he came out. So he joined us a little bit late. And I think in joining us a little bit late and jumping in, I think he's having just some soreness and some tightness that you kind of get going through preseason, especially when you jump in a touch late. It's possible. So we're just trying to make sure we don't push too fast with him. So we backed out because he was having a little bit of some tightness. But over this week, he'll start to integrate back in as we move towards Miami and the opening day.
high ankle sprain. Did you ever have that as a player? And it's really an arduous recovery from that.
I did. It's brutal. I actually had it in the Meadowlands on the old turf.
Oh,
And
well, that was, yeah.
yeah, I
Good
was
thing you could have done your Achilles on that turf.
I thought I did everything. I thought I did my knee, my everything, but I was moving in one direction, quickly tried to stop to deal with a cutback cross, and I felt like my whole leg disappeared. And it literally took me probably 6 months, 6 months to get to the other side of it, where you feel like you're feeling really comfortable and ready to go. You can grind through it a little bit, but not without the pain. So I know what he's going through, but I think the ankle is feeling a lot better now. I think now it's just getting through the muscle soreness, the tightness, the getting himself soccer fit and ready to do what he does.
How about Dejan
Yep.
Joveljic, your
Yep.
striker? I've heard he's got a bit of a hip thing. Maybe you're being cautious with him too, but we haven't really seen him in the last couple of weeks, and he's obviously a pretty big figure in what you're going to do moving forward.
Yeah, he came in. He was healthy. He was fit. We played a scrimmage. It was our first of preseason. And about 15 minutes into it, he went up for a header on that he shouldn't have gone up for. He should have just left it with the goalkeeper. And I think he took a knee into the hip, which has led to, again, kind of a hip pointer / strain in there. He'll go tomorrow. We'll get him going tomorrow, 30 minutes. He's been training for the last few days. But yeah, he's going to play an important role for us. This is now going on his third year as a forward here, so he's maturing. We think we have the pieces that we can put around him to help him to be successful, like he was the first year. Last year was just kind of a struggle for him, and a lot of different reasons. I think collectively that we needed some different pieces to help him out. So we're optimistic, and I think that this could be a good year for him, because I think the pieces around him are really going to help him to be successful. He's a finisher. He's not a guy who's going to create his own chances, but if we can create spaces and windows in the box, then he's a very good finisher in one touch, two touch with his head. So we've got to help him to move center backs and create some spaces for him, and then I think he can really do the job. I mean, he had 15 the first year, so there's no reason. And that was in some substitution appearances. If we get some more minutes, I'd like to think there's more on the table for him there.
I don't want to belabor the injury front. We'll just maybe mention one more because it's pretty
Yeah,
critical. I mean, you're coming off a season where you conceded a lot of goals, and
sure.
Jalen Neal is now out 6 to 8 weeks. He had the sports hernia surgery, so was it a complication from that, or is it something else?
Well, it was the original sports hernia surgery didn't. I guess there's multiple ways to go about it. Back in my day, there wasn't a ton of ways because I had it done. But the initial one that was like a release didn't really solve the issue completely. So they went in again and as a follow up because he was still having some discomfort. And then the follow up, which was just the other day, he had another surgery, and so now it's a recovery 6 to 8 weeks or so. But hopefully this one will obviously go smoother. But I think this was just maybe a little more traditional route. I don't know exactly how you would describe these, but there's more than one way to solve this issue nowadays.
But once he gets healthy, exciting young player at the back for you, yes?
Yeah, I mean he was. I thought he was excellent last year in the first 6 months. I mean, part of it was he burst onto the scene in the national team in January, and then the kid couldn't get a break. When I say couldn't get a break, he literally couldn't get a break. He was playing a lot for us. He was traveling and playing with the national team, and he had gone from, this was sort of his debut into first team football, and he was all of a sudden playing everywhere every week, and I think it just kind of caught up to him a little bit by mid-season, hence the hernia, and now we're just trying to get him over that and back in. But I thought he was very solid. He's, for me, and in the U.S., he's one of the best center backs at organizing attacks and finding entry passes and manipulating defenses. And his defensive reading and his defensive understanding and his physicality is improving as he continues to fill out and grow. He's still pretty young, but I think he has one of the best all-around packages as a center back that we have in this country. And so, want to get him back on the field and get him healthy and keep him moving forward.
LA Galaxy head coach Greg Vanney with us. So you took over the Galaxy 21, fourth in the table in 2022, highest finish for the club since 2016. And then this past season, 23 out of the playoffs, 26 overall in the MLS standings.
Yeah.
And we talked about the goals conceded, 67 goals conceded, which was the high watermark in MLS. And I just wonder, off-season, backroom staff get together, what kinds of things are you discussing? Are you tweaking things? Some of this is personnel driven, we understand, but
Sure.
how are you going about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to approach that type of season from a defensive standpoint with all things reviewed and considered. So for us, it was, yes, personnel that helps, because inside of that there is a lot of just immature mistakes, bad decisions, individual errors, things like that, where we were self-inflicted wounds. But I think we have to consider how we want to defend. Do we want to defend the same way collectively? But you really have to take into account kind of the front to back defending and how everybody is involved, and making sure that the commitment is there, the clarity is there, that we have our distances are appropriate so that we can support each other defensively, things like that. And then, as I've said to these guys, it's sometimes in the game we have an ideology of how we want to play, and yes, we want to keep possession and we want to play through things, but sometimes you just have to make business decisions and put the ball 30 rows up in the stands and be okay with that. And so I think these are things that we're just trying to work through with our group, is to find that balance between our ideology, but also being practical and being smart in situations, and doing the right thing, to get results, not just to try to play beautiful football, if you will. So
For young players in particular, though, there's Greg Vanney, veteran coach, trophies. You have your way of playing, and they kind of might get caught up in the fact that, well, this is what they really want. So
yeah.
even though the situation exposes itself where that ball should just be drilled, try to find the target early, whatever it is, because you're under pressure. Sometimes that's hard, especially for a younger player, because he's been so ingrained with how you want to play.
Yeah, it's true, and I've seen that. And what we're trying to do is create more rules, if you will, around some of these decisions. If we're in certain areas, if we're in our box, if we're certain areas, then the expectation in that situation is to clear. So it's trying to take a little bit out of their hands, to where there's just an expectation. But I also think that's part of learning and part of maturing, is recognizing, and it's understanding yourself on what you can and can't do as a player, and what you're capable of doing and when to do it. So finding the right combination of creating the right expectations and giving them the green light to just clear a ball, and versus trying to do something maybe more complicated sometimes, is again, all things that we're trying to really harp on. And we've spent the better part of this preseason primarily focusing on the defensive side of things. Having said that, we're still integrating a lot of our key players, including two DPs, our striker, our number 10, our Gaston Brugman still coming in. We still have a lot of really important figures that we're having to integrate into this preseason.
I wonder, and preseason is preseason, and winning in preseason, you look at it, my broadcast partner who played in England over 600 games said, one season we lost every preseason game and we were promoted in the league, and then another season we win every preseason game and then we get relegated. But in your situation, you got off to the slow start in 2023 and you've yet to win in preseason. Is there a point in time where you have to learn to win? I don't know if that's a proper way to put it, but does it become important at some point? You've got a couple of more left here at Coachella, and then the regular season starts against Miami.
Yeah, it's a funny balance in preseason, because for us, even though we've lost some games, when we've had our prime, because we haven't even had most of our, what you would probably call our penciled in starters. Not a lot, good chunks of them haven't even played for us yet. But when you look at a lot of the games where we've had our primary first team players in, we've actually had leads in those periods. We've played well. We've not conceded many goals. So if you just take out those, because when we move away from those guys, we're actually putting on 16-year-old players we're putting on second team trialists, and we're putting on some other guys, because when you don't have your starters, you're down to your kind of those next group, and then when we sub in, we're going really young. So some of that I think is a little bit false. Where I think we where we needed to do better was particularly in this last game, where had guys on the field who needed to play 90 minutes, and we didn't close the game out well. We made some late mistakes that we shouldn't have made, that we need to be better at, that ended up taking a 1-1 game that we probably had the best chances to go up 2-1 or 3-1 even. And then we turned around and we turned that into a loss by making a couple mistakes. That for me was the first sort of set of minutes where I felt like we let ourselves down when it came to that. But to your point, I think it's a fine line between getting guys the appropriate minutes, getting them fit, trying to look after health and all those kinds of things, and then prioritizing winning on some level. And so, yes, I think winning is important, but for us right now, I think what's important is that we get our group healthy, on the same page, ready to start a season, because as we saw last year, to do anything other than that is not a good road. You want to be healthy. And so we've got to prioritize that and try to get, Ricky and Dayon and get our DPs here and get Gaston and all these guys healthy and on the field and connected is the priority right now.
It's completely understandable too, but let me ask you this.
Yep.
What you're trying to do in preseason, and also maybe coming off a year where you don't get into the playoffs and it's a mentality issue, you probably, if you had your preference, you'd probably want to be going at it a little bit harder and extending some of the minutes of the players. But because you're limited at this point, it's tough.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It is a challenge. I mean, we're going to have guys who are going to play their second and third 90-minute games going into the first one. And we're going to have guys who've probably only got through 45 minutes through preseason. So that's going to be a balance as we get there. I think the guys that are coming in are experienced guys. So, you'd like to think that plays in their favor a little bit. But at the same time, you don't want guys to start under the under the gun a little bit when it comes to their physical health, because it does make them a little bit vulnerable starting a high intensity season. And you're playing Miami the first game, and all emotions are going to be in that, because it's going to be such a big game, and you're playing against Miami and Messi and all the players that come with that, and the stadium's going to be super full, and everybody's watching the game, and so that's going to come with its own set of emotions in addition to trying to be at your maximum fitness level.
Yeah, interesting. I wanted to ask you about one more player, because it's this young DP, Gabriel Peck, who has yet to arrive. He's been playing with the Brazilian U23s. I don't know where that stands right now. We're conducting this interview on February 13th.
Yeah.
And then he still has to go back and get his proper visa before he can come in?
Yeah, so they played their last game the 11th. He's back in Brazil. He heads to Rio, which is where the embassy is, tomorrow. He'll have an appointment on Thursday, and hopefully he'll get his visa back, or get his passport back with visa and everything on hopefully Thursday, Friday, and he'll be able to fly and be here on the weekend. So That's our hope. If all things go smooth, if I'm being honest, not many things went smooth last year, so we're hoping things go smooth this year. So
you deserve it.
We'll see. Oh man, I tell you, I don't know if we deserve it, but God, it would be nice.
So. And then finally, I suppose it's somewhat, and you brought it up, kind of difficult not to look ahead to this home opener, February 25th against Inter Messi. Yeah. I found it interesting that the decision by the club was to keep it at Dignity Health instead of maybe trying to go to the Rose Bowl, where you'd probably get 60 or 70,000.
Yeah, I think we would. I think there's, for us last year, the 4th of July game against LAFC was, for I think everybody it was pretty special. We didn't want to go back to the Rose Bowl too many times over the course of the season. And also, I think, if you look at the big picture, playing Inter Miami and playing Messi at home the first game, while you're not selling a bunch of tickets to one particular game, it does, the way you can package it out, it does help you to sell maybe more tickets over the course of the season and stuff like that. So they were clever about how they package things up, but you try to do your best upstairs. The guys, when I say upstairs, that's our business crew and everybody else, to to not make it just about one game. You want to make it about the team and about as much of the season as you can. So it was a tricky one because we definitely talked about it. We definitely talked about it.
I bet you were pretty happy that they flew like 50,000 miles to play all these scrimmages across the globe in the Middle East, and they do have that appearance of maybe being a little worn out.
I tell you, I have two experiences. One was in 2008 when I rejoined back with the Galaxy for my last season, and David Beckham was here, and we did a similar tour where we went to Hawaii and Honolulu, and we played 2 games there, and then from there we went to Korea, to China, to Hong Kong, and back.
Wow.
And we did not start the season well at all, and we had a tough run. Now they have more talent collectively than we did at the time, but it was not an easy one. The second one was in 2018 with Toronto after the treble, and going into the CONCACAF Champions League. We did a trip to LA, back to Toronto, down to Mexico City to try to get used to the altitude and to play down there, to Colorado to play our first game, back to Toronto. We started to fly everywhere, and it didn't get us long term what we wanted. We did well in the Champions League, but we lost so many guys over the process, and that's well documented. But those are my two experiences with a lot of travel in the early days and then the preseason, and neither of them went super well in the longer term. So I hope for them that it does go better than it went for us, but not on the day that they play us. Hopefully they have
Not on February 25th. No, it's going to be
hopefully
very
really,
interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting to see the start of their season.